The Black Lives Matter movement, this century's Negro community, is left with no choice. Earlier, Representative Dean said, how did we get here? We got here because we forgot where we came from. We forgot the kind of progress that we have made with the civil rights movement. We forgot about the great legacy of our state with Hubert Humphrey authoring the Civil Rights Bill, and remembering that we were supposed to have a different country. For me, liberty and freedom and justice is a fundamental part of our country. I always talk about how we need protests, how we need organizers, how we need agitators to constantly create urgency. We have become complacent since the civil rights movement. We have forgotten what people like Dr. Martin Luther King fought for. We forget that many of the freedoms that we enjoy today and many of the liberties that some of us enjoy came at a cost. In Selma, when they were in the midst of fighting for the Civil Rights Act, they were met with great force. The police were fighting them. Regular citizens in that city were fighting them. And on this bridge, in this protest on Bloody Sunday, many of them were brutally attacked. But the next week, they went back, and now history honors them in a different way. When the airport was being shut down and charges were being filed, our wonderful governor said he did not want charges to be filed. He didn't want history to remember him in the brutal way that it remembers George Wallace. He didn't want to be that kind of hateful dictator. He wanted history to remember him in a way that advanced our country's progress. So I want us in this room to think about how we want history to remember us. Once we leave here tonight, there will be a vote casted for this particular provision. And someday they're going to teach children in history classrooms about this particular night. And so you get to decide. You get to decide. Do you want to have the kind of history that says you were on the side of oppression, or do you want to be on the side of liberty and justice? That is the decision you get to make tonight. I also wanted to address a few things that were talked about earlier. Representative Fabian, I think he's left the room, but he talked about how he wasn't sure what happens when protests are happening and ambulances come through. What happens to those people in the ambulances? How do they get to the hospital? I know there's a lot of conversations and a lot of hypotheticals about what happens. But I passed out a picture of what happens. People move to the side for ambulances. Most of you who are supporting this have not experienced a protest. Those of us who live in the Twin Cities can speak more clearly to it. And so when we say, this is what happens, we are not making it up. It's a clear image of what takes place. I also want to talk about what is our duty as legislators. Representative Lesh earlier spoke to the fact that we need to work on policies not out of anger or because we are annoyed, but because they further a common good, that they are beneficial for most of us. And so this particular provision is created, whether you want to say it or not. It's created because there's a particular annoyance we have with a particular group of people who have decided to organize themselves because they are tired of being invisible. They are tired of being ignored. They are tired of coming to committee hearings speaking against the provisions that we are creating with no one person speaking in support, but we are still pushing them through because we say your voice does not matter. We don't represent you, we don't care about you, you are not a voter. That is why this is happening. So I want you to think about the kind of message that you are sending. You are continuing to say, we don't care about you. We don't want to see you. We don't want to hear from you. We find you annoying. We find you nuisance. And we would like to just have you disappear. The reality is you can't make us disappear. We are part of this state, we are part of this country. And there have been many laws that have changed in this country that were detrimental to people who look like me and Representative Rina Moran. If people just said, this is the law of the land, let's not worry about it. That wouldn't have been the right thing to do. And so, regardless of whether these laws exist or not, we have an obligation to make sure people's liberties are expanded, not limited. That is an obligation that we have. Finally, I want to talk about cost, because I know that a lot of you are on the other side of the aisle are very much concerned about the cost to taxpayers for everything. When we talk about funding education, you say, we want to save money. We want to make sure people have tax cuts. everything we try to do for people, you try to make it about money. And so I want to make this about money. This particular provision would make it so that a person can be sentenced up to a year. What is the cost of incarcerating someone up to a year to the state, to our taxpayers? In Minnesota, it's nearly $42,000 per year, per person. So if you arrest me because I protested on a highway, and you incarcerate me for a year, Minnesota taxpayer is paying $42,000 for my incarceration just because I was protesting for my right to have a living wage, to have an affordable housing, to make sure that my son is not going to be gunned down in the street by a cop that was to protect him. That is what people are protesting. And so taxpayers are going to pay $42,000 to have that person spend a year in jail. And God knows how much more it costs for, putting them through court and trial. And what does the Minnesota taxpayer get back for this? Because we don't have research that shows, because we have sent one person to jail, that there is not going to be protesters. Because history has shown us that regardless of what the penalties are and how far the penalties have gone for protests, people still come out. People still are willing to risk their lives for their liberties. That is one thing that is amazing about this country. People are still willing to risk their lives for their liberties. So when you talk to your voters, are you having a conversation with them about this increased penalty and what that means for their hard-earned money? Because I'm sure they would be interested to know that for the 26, 35, 42 protesters that get charged daily, that is how much we're going to pay for them. So I want you to think about this. This is not about the inconvenience that you feel when you are stuck in that highway. I feel very inconvenient every time it snows and there's an accident and I have to sit on the highway for an hour until that gets cleared up. Very inconvenienced. But I don't think about creating a law that makes it so that it doesn't snow or somebody comes and clears that snow a lot faster. We don't create laws because we individually are inconvenienced. That is not how we use the privileges that we have as servants to the public. So think about this. Think about what this means for the citizens that would love to continue to have their liberties expanded. What this means for the citizens who don't know the extra costs and inconvenience this creates for them. And I want you to strongly consider, regardless of party line, strongly consider supporting this amendment. And I urge you to vote green. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady rise?
Call the House, Mr. Speaker. I hate to break up the 100% white male card game in the retiring room, but I think this is an important debate.
Are there 10 hands? Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House. The clerk will take the roll.